Tonight for dinner, we are having birria tacos. These are so fantastic. These are one of my all-time favorite foods. I actually only started making these about maybe a year ago. I saw these being advertised all over TikTok, and at first I thought it had to be a scam, but I was successfully influenced and I gave in and I purchased them. And I'm so glad I did, because these are absolutely one of my favorite things ever. These are so easy to make. It's a slow cooker meal, so you don't even have to really do anything. I like to cook mine on the stove top. It lets me sear the meat first and cook everything in my one Dutch oven instead of searing and then switching to a pan, or skipping the searing altogether if you don't have one of those fancy slow cookers. But it's so easy. And then at the end, once the meat is shredded, you can make yourself some tacos. You can make yourself some like crispy pan fried tacos like I have made, or you can have it over rice. You can have it with beans. You can eat this in so many ways. This is something that I kind of really leaned into when I first started to lose some weight. At first I was eating this on flour tortillas, but when I was kind of starting my weight loss, I was looking for other options, and I found out that corn tortillas are super low in calories, at least compared to flour tortillas. So I would have, 2 to 3 corn tortilla tacos. I'd cut the calories down by 2/3, and I still get to eat my favorite foods. And it turns out I actually like it with corn tortillas even more than flour tortillas anyways. So it's kind of a win-win for everybody. They're low calorie, they're filling. These would be a great food if you are looking for some volume eating. You can kind of stuff these tacos as full as you want and keep the carbs a little bit on the lower end. But they're just so easy and they're so delicious. And I really hope that you guys try this and eat this, because it's absolutely worth it. So the very first thing we're going to do is just sear our meat. My Dutch oven has been heating up for a few minutes, so I'm going to add some oil into that and then set my chuck roast in. This chuck roast is about 2.5 pounds. This is going to be enough to feed us for tonight and at least one more night, but it'll probably be for 2 more nights. And this is going to sear for about 4 to 5 minutes on each side. You don't have to use a chuck roast, but what's really important for this is that you have a fatty piece of meat. If you use a non-fatty piece of meat, it's just not quite the same. I have done that, and it's just way better with a nicely marbled piece. Our meat is searing. The next thing we're going to do is just start the consommé, or the broth that the meat is going to cook in. I know this is something that you can definitely make at home, but I have been using these Birria Bombs for a long time, and I think that they are about 1% of the effort of making it from scratch, and they are absolutely just as delicious. This is what I have been using for 90% of the times that I've made birria. I really like to, I do this kind of in a really specific way that I know they don't do when you see this being used online. I like to put one of these in my 4-cup measure, and then I fill this up with hot water, and I make sure that it's completely broken up and dissolved before this goes into the Dutch oven with the meat. You can use beef broth. I have used beef broth before, but I just kind of like it better with water. It's simple, it's easy, and I don't think it needs the extra flavor that the beef broth brings. I'm going to go ahead and add some water to this, and we'll get this all broken up. So I just like to fill this up with really hot water, and then I'll kind of break up the Birria Bomb with my tongs. I just like to move it around, stir it, and I kind of like crush it as inside of the hot water, which just helps it break up really nicely. And it'll get softer after a few minutes of just sitting in here. But by the time the meat's fully seared, this will be most of the way dissolved. One of these Birria Bombs is good for up to 4 pounds of meat. I have not actually made this with 4 pounds of meat. I generally only do about 2 to 3 pounds, and I'm really happy with how that turns out every time. And this has already gotten a lot smaller. I'm gonna go ahead and let this keep soaking in this hot water. I'm gonna go flip my chuck roast and let that finish searing. All right, our meat is very nicely seared on both sides. I'm gonna go ahead and add in our consommé. And I like to kind of do a little bit at first to let any big sizzling that's gonna happen and calm down before I add in the rest of it. And that, of course, was a super, super concentrated. I've still got a little bit of the Birria Bomb left in here. I'm gonna fill this back up with water. And then we'll add the rest of that in. And it's okay if it's not 100% dissolved. It will definitely dissolve while it cooks. I've added in just about 8 cups of water, probably a little closer to 7. But I will check on this. This is gonna cook for probably 4 to 5 hours, and I'll check on it about every hour to make sure that there is still enough broth in here. I'm gonna let this come to a simmer, and then I'm just gonna cover it and let it cook for a few hours. Our birria has been simmering for quite a few hours. It's been about 4 hours now, and I can see that it's almost done. The meat is really starting to come apart, but it's not quite as tender as I want it to be, and a lot of water has evaporated, so I'm gonna go ahead and add some more back in. I'm gonna add in about 2 cups of water, and I'm gonna close this back, and we're gonna let it simmer for about another 45 minutes to an hour. My meat has been simmering for about 5.5 hours, and it's very tender now. I'm gonna take everything out and set it aside in a bowl so it can start to cool down so that I can shred it. And in the meantime, I will leave my consommé simmering so it can start to thicken up. My meat is cooled down, my consommé is still simmering, so I'm gonna go ahead and get this all shredded. I really like to just do this with my hands. It lets me separate out the fat a lot easier. I know if you like the fat, you can definitely keep it in. I know a lot of restaurants that serve birria tacos don't really separate out the fat. It's just not something that I really like to keep in my tacos at home. And I like to get these kind of thicker nitrile gloves. They let me start doing this before the meat has cooled down very much. And this should probably only take me about 10 minutes to get everything fully shredded. My meat is fully shredded. I'm going to add a little bit of consommé into this bowl just to keep the meat kind of marinating in that flavor and to keep it from getting too dry. And then it is time to make our tacos. I will be making 2 kinds of tacos today. I'm gonna make some with flour tortillas and then some with corn tortillas as well. The corn tortillas I like to assemble right in the pan, and I like to do those first because they take a little bit longer than the flour tortillas. So we're gonna get those started, and then we will come back over here and assemble our flour tortilla tacos as well. All right, to make our corn tortilla tacos, I'm gonna start by putting a little bit of oil in the pan, and then I'm just gonna lay the corn tortilla right down. These start to break if you fold them before they heat up. And then something that I've found that really, really helps them from breaking as they're heating up, I like to just brush on some of the consommé. I find the more hydrated they are and the warmer they are, the much easier they are to handle. Now that my tortilla is bubbling, I'm gonna go ahead and give it a flip. And I really like to make sure that the first side is cooked really nicely and is just barely starting to get some color on it before I assemble the taco. And I'm gonna do the same thing on this side. I'm I'm going to brush a little bit more Consomé. And I'm going to let it cook for about 30 more seconds until one side is just a little bit crispy. I'm just going to give this one more flip, and now my first side I can see is getting a little bit of color on it. So I'm going to start assembling this taco. And the way I do this is I just kind of sprinkle some cheese over the entire thing. I don't like too much. And then I'm going to add in some of my Consomé soaked beef here, just enough to cover half of the tortilla. And I'm going to let this cheese start to melt a little bit, and once it's starting to get a little bit sticky, I'm just going to fold this over. And I'm going to let this cook until it is brown and crispy on both sides. For our flour tortilla tacos, we're actually doing basically the exact same thing, but these I don't assemble in the pan. I like to assemble these on a cutting board and then put them in a pan just to melt the cheese together and kind of crisp up the tortilla a little bit. These cook in the pan a lot faster, so I just think it's a little bit easier to assemble them on a cutting board. I just like to do a pretty thin layer of cheese on half of the tortilla all the way to the edge. And then one thing that I do differently is I make sure that there's not a whole lot of Consomé in the meat that goes on this tortilla. I don't want this tortilla to get too soggy, and we're going to be dipping it in Consomé at the end, so it'll kind of be okay anyways. And I just like to make sure that it's pretty evenly distributed. And then I'm going to add one more layer of cheese right on top of the meat. And then fold that in half. And I like to kind of tuck everything in to make sure that it all is going to stay in there. And then I'm just going to set it to the side and do the same with my other two flour tortillas. All right, and all three of my flour tortilla tacos are done. I'm going to go ahead and cook these in the same pan with the corn tortillas and get this cheese melted and get these tortillas crisped up. While my tacos are cooking, I just wanted to take a moment to talk about the cheese that I've decided to use for these. This is in no way a traditional birria taco. A lot of people online might even tell you that it's not birria, it's birria flavored barbacoa, which may be true. Mexican food has a very long and deep history, and I don't know all of it. But this is how I've been making this for as long as I've been making it for. When I started making these, I was shredding my own cheese. I was shredding Oaxaca and pepper jack cheese, and then it kind of just switched to pepper jack as the Oaxaca got harder and harder to get. And then I started trying this Kraft cheese, and there is just not enough of a difference for me to spend the extra money on the Oaxaca, take the extra time to shred it. This is easy and it tastes fantastic. And if you want to use a different type of cheese, then I say use whatever kind of cheese you like. I think what's important is that it's something that will just melt and hold the tortilla together like a quesadilla. And it's got to have a flavor that you like. I haven't tried any fancy cheeses. I've really just tried a couple of white cheeses and this shredded Kraft Mexican style blend. This is the one that I like, but definitely use whatever your family likes the best. My corn tortillas are coming along very nicely. I'm going to add a little bit more oil. And we're just going to add in one of our flour tortilla tacos. And then I like to do the exact same thing with these. I'm going to just brush on a little bit of the Consomé here. And that cheese is melting really quickly, which is exactly what I want. I'm going to give this a flip so that Consomé side can start to crisp up immediately. And then I'm going to go ahead and just kind of move these around. And we're going to put one more taco in here. And we're gonna do the same thing one more time. Brush on some consomme. And really my only goal here is to get these flour tortillas a little bit crispy and to get the cheese all the way melted through. That is gonna happen super, super fast. Usually takes about 5 minutes total for the flour tortilla tacos. And then while we're here, I'm gonna flip my corn tortillas, and I really, really like to saturate those with the consomme. I think that just the more hydrated the corn tortillas are, the crispier they are, and the better they are. If you don't like your corn tortillas super crispy, you may want to take them out about now, but I like them to be super crispy all the way through. All right, I'm gonna let those cook for about 5 minutes, and then dinner will be ready. My last taco is done, and the way I like to put these on the plate is I like to put the last one that came out here, and then I'm gonna flip these other two over so that there's no guessing which one is the coolest, because these stay hot for a really long time. And then, of course, we cannot forget the most important part, the consomme. I've got these little ramekins. Any tiny little bowl that can hold some of the broth that's big enough for you to dip the taco in is all you need. And I like to fill these up a little over halfway. This consomme freezes really well, and sometimes I'll just save it in containers, and on a weeknight I'll simmer some chicken. I'll cook some chicken in it and make a really quick kind of chicken flavor, birria flavored chicken tacos, which I've got consomme in my freezer right now. If I have enough, then maybe next time I'll just combine it all and I'll simmer a whole chuck roast in it instead of using one of the Birria Bombs. So I only like to fill these up halfway so that I can save as much of this as possible. But that is it. Dinner is done. This is one of my all-time favorite meals. I've been having this for a little while, since I saw these Birria Bombs on TikTok Shop, and they completely changed my life. I absolutely love these tacos, and I hope you guys try them too, because they are fantastic. My house has been smelling like this for the last, 5 or 6 hours, and this is really, really hot, but I don't think I can wait anymore. I like to really, really soak up this consomme in each bite. Cheers. This is such a great low effort meal, and I've got leftovers for at least one more night. The consomme is so flavorful, the meat is so flavorful, and I just love how easily everything comes together. And this really is great on corn tortillas, flour tortillas, on rice. I have seen people turn this into a burrito or a breakfast burrito if you add in some eggs. This is just so delicious and so fantastic. I'm gonna go eat the rest of my dinner.